Last night, I had an incident. I was with someone who is generally pretty close, where essentially I was activated emotionally and utilized the skills that PrecisionCycle and all the other tools that have amassed throughout the years to really self-calibrate, bring myself back into the field as my integrated self, and then started to implement and vocalize my boundaries. And what I found was that situation was interpreted a certain way, and it began this cycle within myself where I felt my own narcissism being activated. And this is often the thing that happens when we have arguments with people. We don't realize the malignant nature of people's psychological defenses, the extreme position in which they are in oftentimes, and the ways in which they look to self-soothe, which may include dysregulating a partner or someone else in a relationship to obtain that level of comfort that they need to satiate whatever's happening internally that has activated this personality function, disorder, if you want to call it. They're feeling shame. That shame kicks in cognitive dissonance. The cognitive dissonance then, if we're going back to the tennis court metaphor, plays the ball over to narcissism, and narcissism will then start to activate primitive defenses to offload the shame and discomfort that's felt. That's really, in a nutshell, what's happening. And the reality is that this activation is happening because it's out of their control. These are the things that I'm trying to really stress and put forward here. And one of the things that mental health professionals don't necessarily do primarily is illustrate that these behaviors oftentimes are innate. They are natural. They're things that people do naturally because it's just a learned reflex. And the reality is, until we start to realize that learned reflex is bad for us, we're not going to change that. As partners in any relationship, we walk a very thin line between our appropriateness when it comes to pointing these things out. When we look at the physiological changes that occur in perimenopause and just the life cycle in general, when we look at boundary culture as it's defined in places like the Netherlands and how the Dutch utilize boundaries as relationship hygiene as opposed to clinical tools, we start to see that boundaries are the thing that is oftentimes missing from people's self-care routine. We will go and pay hundreds and thousands of dollars for practitioners that practice alternative medicines, Eastern medicines, all types of weekend getaways at retreats, tantric focused seminars, everything except face the thing that you're avoiding. And that is the role of the partner here, to literally be built different and to be the person that is stopping that cycle in its tracks. You talk about ending generational trauma. As a man, as a partner, as somebody who is supporting somebody who is currently going through personality issues, whether that's because they've developed it through a lifetime of experience, which includes abuse, or because they're developing it due to physiological changes in the body. Regardless, we have to understand that these things are happening automatically. And if we don't maintain a mindful presentation and respect the fact that we have to implement boundaries, not only to protect ourselves, but to model them in the relationship and bring this containment, then we have to really start to focus on how we just don't get boundaries right, and how boundaries is something that literally will save you. You don't need magic pills. You don't need the influencers of Instagram to prescribe this. What you need is simply to start practicing and enforcing some simple boundaries, because what's happening here is a lack of framework. And that lack of framework is leaving you disorganized, discombobulated, fragmented. By definition, we're talking about fragmentation as part of personality issues. These are the things I'm trying to get people to understand. We all have these elements, but it's a product of our upbringing. It's a product of our environment. It's a product of our experience, and it's not a pathology. It is something that we do because it makes us feel good. We cope with whatever sets us off by doing this thing that we do, whether that's substances, whether that's relationships, whether that's eating disorders, whether that's all kinds of other things that we do to avoid and offload shame. What we need to look at is how do we build boundaries so that we're not doing the things that create self-harm? How do we create frameworks so that I am moving forward successfully? Even when I'm having evenings when I'm being dysregulated to the point where I'm not able to sleep at night because I'm carrying all of that emotional anxiety. Being part of the PrecisionCycle methodology and understanding its essence and capabilities, you wake up with continued motivation to maintain your process and move forward, to keep doing the things in your life that will get you to that place where you need to be. The Lacanian drive that gets us to where Carl Jung writes about is our ultimate destiny, fulfilling our archetypes. That's when we're truly happy. And when we're not doing that, we're stuck in some netherworld in our head. And that is because we don't have the boundaries to get ourselves out. And so really maintaining a lifestyle where boundaries become first and foremost automatic, innate, non-negotiable. You literally become built different because nobody nowadays has the fortitude to practice and maintain boundaries. Everyone's too scared of losing friends, too scared of abandonment. 58% divorce rates have led us to fear of abandonment. And because of that, we maintain relationships we know are bad for us. We fail to seek out other people that we know are better for our well-being. We ghost people that we know can give us what we want. But because we're so lost in ourselves, we're so afraid, we give ourselves imposter syndrome and opt out of being appreciated, noticed, seen, loved the way that we know we can be and the way we know others can to us. So this is the thing that we see clinically. There's no right side up and down. We're so discombobulated at times that we don't know which direction we're facing. Grounding, boundaries are not just trite words. These are actual tools that work. Thank you for joining me on a special Friday. I'm Enrique. This is Elevate.epo. What makes a PrecisionCycle operator? We talk a lot about what is PrecisionCycle. Is it therapy? No. Is it coaching? No. It's optimization. What exactly is that? It's teaching you the frameworks to live your life the way you want to live. That's the short version. But what does that mean? In practice, we teach the anchoring, the regulated nervous system, the tactical emotional literacy, the vision that extends beyond the moment. We're creating the person that can understand the field, read the situation, calibrate it, and just like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or one of these quarterbacks that is brilliant in what they do, we're able to read the defenses that are presented, those defenses being other people that are preventing us at times from obtaining the things that we want to obtain in life, happiness. If you look at those types of situations, then a lot of this becomes pretty clear because we don't want to make things out to be adversarial. That is just the way society has created it. People go out and compare themselves to others all the time. We watch sports and we want to see one team beat another team. We look at politics and it's a red team versus blue team. Everything becomes about tribalism. When we're not anchored, we get lost in positions and become paralyzed. We have to understand what the field is telling us. The game itself is rigged. The game is going to put an opponent in front of you. Relationships or partnerships. The reality is, because of the stress, because of the trauma, because of the oppression, because of all the things that happen, we're not in true partnerships at times. We are in very adversarial states. And in those adversarial states, we need to understand they're not looking to hurt us consciously, but to advance their narcissism unconsciously. it is appropriate to look at it as a football field and understand the defenses someone is throwing at you. And so we've looked at perimenopause. Menopause itself is a critical life-changing position in the body. Physiologically, skeletal muscle structures are changing. Hormonal chemistry is changing. Body is actively going through a process. And there's quite grieving that occurs, an infinite sadness that's presented. This is that natural depression that will begin this tennis court match between existential dread and the need to not be abandoned. When we see that, and we understand that the person across from us, which we love very much, which we want to support, they can't help the way that they're behaving. They're behaving in a way that is clinically similar to personality disorders. As their partners, as the people who are here to support, we get frustrated because we feel like we're not being appreciated, we're not being seen, we're not being welcomed. But the reality is that we're working through internal structures, psychological structures that are very much creating psychotic adjacent behaviors. And because of that, we have to understand that we can't get mad at people for behaving the way they do because they're going through a certain thing. If someone had broken their leg, you wouldn't be mad at them for not running the marathon. If someone had just suffered a heart attack, you wouldn't be mad at them for not getting on the treadmill. And if someone is going through a life-altering and changing situation, you can't be mad at them for not knowing how to express themselves in a clear, consistent, cohesive manner. Thus, it is upon us, the well-calibrated, PrecisionCycle, built different operator, to be that voice of reason, to be that anchor, to be that center, to be that boundary, to be that floor that establishes reality and maintains it in an empathetic stance and understands that there's activation occurring that needs to be worked through and processed. That's utilizing patience, utilizing empathy, utilizing active listening, creating the space we need to make sure that we're not punishing people for having the beliefs they have in that moment, but we are redirecting to reality and enforcing boundaries. Those boundaries are, I suffer myself with regulating my own emotions when you present in this way. Thus, I need to ask you as a person here supporting you, in order for me to be 100% committed to this process, I need you to be more mindful of when these dysregulations and activations are occurring. That is a boundary. Notice how I didn't punish anyone. I didn't make them feel bad about themselves. I didn't kick them while they were down or pathologize them even more. I spoke to how it makes me feel. I feel anxious. I feel put down. I feel frustrated. I feel like I'm not heard when you behave a certain way. Placing the boundary down that way, that's pretty simple. I'm not accusing you of anything other than telling you how I feel when you do a certain thing. And now with that knowledge, the person will hopefully take that from an ego syntonic position, which is normalized, to an ego dystonic or ego alien position where now every time they engage in that behavior, there's that little thought in their head that tells them, yeah, this might not be good because I've already been called out on it. That's how boundaries work. These are the way our fathers worked with us. They showed us love, and then they showed us how to operate. They gave us the tools to understand that we have power, but then told us how to hold it responsibly. When that mechanism isn't there, we see how societies fall apart because there's no calibration and power dynamics within relationships. Men aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Women are doing more than they're supposed to be. Crossed up energies here, feminine and masculine energies, and breakdowns in society. Weak men that are unable to maintain a modicum of strength. Women have chosen isolation, normalized as being quote unquote bad bees, but what they're doing is just normalizing their histrionic personalities and weaponizing any type of critique. This is where we've gotten to in society. We need to understand that in order to be a serious operator and maintain our presence and be pointed towards true north, we have to make sure that the old emotional tricks don't work anymore. We're aware of what they're doing. We're aware of what's happening. We're aware of the cycle that we're being sucked into, and we're actively working to stay out of it because we're going to be that bigger person in the room for once. And that's an interesting saying when you think about it. Be the bigger person. What they're saying is be mature, be integrated, be the person that understands that somebody comes in and they act a certain way because they can't help themselves. Rather than punishing them or punishing yourself, you're going to accept the fact that that's how they are, and you're going to implement the thing that's going to protect you, which is your boundaries. This is a thing that we need to understand, especially during perimenopause. Most partners are going to collapse under this shift. Real operators are going to adapt and are not going to be left behind. On Wednesday, we looked at the Dutch, the Netherlands, and their boundary culture, and we talked about what Americans can learn from them. It was a very lively discussion, one that I think is very needed, because in the United States, we are stuck heavily in the white coat licensed therapist model, which is creating safe spaces to go and process, but outside of that, not much. And so we have a world full of people who identify themselves by their trauma and identify their therapists as their main processing token. Another way of saying their substance to gain regulation. Therapy culture has created a demographic of people who are now dependent on their own pathology and crippled by their trauma because they've come to label it as a critical part of their personality. They lead with their trauma and wonder why they don't have any friends and why things are always so negative and so bleak. And maybe that's because we've never gotten to the point where there's been an active attempt to want to reconcile all of these emotions that this traumatic experience left. Residential, I saw it all the time. Women that sure had gone through very serious, significant traumatic experiences that for some reason really enjoyed the fact that they could just refer to that on a daily basis as a reason for why they weren't advancing in progress, why they wanted to continue doing some of the bad behaviors they wanted to do, why they wanted to continue wasting time in treatment as opposed to engaging in the interventions, normalizing avoidance. And that exists because as a society here in the United States, we've gotten so accustomed to welcoming people's differences that we even welcome their dysfunction and try to dismiss that as normal. That's why we have over pathologizing of simple mood fluctuations. It's made by big pharma to sell you more drugs, but it's also made by licensed therapists to give themselves this frame that they're important, when in reality, most of what they do is sit in a room, listen to clients, and rarely ever provide any real directive. I've sat in group supervisions for a number of years. I've listened to the presentations. I hear the instructors, and their advice is essentially just hold them until they collapse under the weight of their own gravity. How is that a recipe for any type of society that builds value? It's no wonder we're in a world where no one wants to go to work, why no one's motivated. We're in a society where people complain about the smallest amount of pain they have to endure. The least bit of discomfort becomes an event to call the ACLU. This is how this therapy culture has really taken the teeth out of society and taken the masculinity out of men, if we're going to be quite frank. Because we sit here and we talk about how men have feelings too in therapy. Yeah, but we don't process the same way. We process by doing. We process by understanding. We process by seeing. We process by talking. And then we process by doing it again. How do men learn? How do men process? They go, they talk, and then they hit the squats. They go, they talk, they get it off their chest, and then they go to some bench presses. That's how men process. And I'm sorry to bring it back down to like just the base levels here, but that's really nature tells us that you can't just sit in the room and talk about your feelings. You have to actually start moving forward and changing that, because that's the only real way that you reconcile these emotions. and you find ways to create boundaries. So there's a lot that we can learn from our Dutch brethren, especially when it comes to the gatekeeping elements here in the United States, licensed professionals who don't want to read the research and acknowledge the research that says lay counselors, when we look at cases in Africa and in Asia, have just as good results with trauma victims than licensed professionals. Yet they want to go on LinkedIn and talk about how licensure should be the bar to entry, and that you're not even allowed to talk to people and try to help them unless you've gone through this gatekeeping process with the psychoanalyst who has never really done anything outside of their life, outside of go to school and talk to people in a room. That's the extent of their life skills. That's what we're trying to sell people on. This is what you need in order for you to be happy. No, that's not what you need. You don't need to go to therapy and talk to someone who's been in school their whole life and who's never really held a real job. You need to go and find someone who can show you the areas in your life that need recalibration. And then you need to go to someone that's going to show you that data, right? Put it into context, give you weekly updates on the movement of that metric, of that data, and that is actually going to move you from you came in here and you're leaving here. You go to any therapist and you're going to sit there and literally talk to people for a year before you get any movement, as opposed to coming to PrecisionCycle, elevate.epo, talking to me for a couple of days and having a full workup, a 7-point dimensional report that shows you exactly where you are and how likely you are to get dysregulated. That's what PrecisionCycle can do. And that's why we're able to have situations like last night where we get challenged and we get called to utilize some of the skills in which, as well-regulated individuals, we maintain so that we can stay coherent and present and fall back to the learnings of PrecisionCycle, the power that we have within ourselves, the vision, the ability to present, enforce, maintain boundaries. That is what gets you through those types of dysregulating situations without lashing out and yelling at people, without saying things that you're going to regret in the morning, without getting up and storming out, without doing some other type of dramatic, histrionic response. Understand one thing, they're acting that way because they need to feel something. They need to feel a certain type of way, so they're going to manipulate you to make sure that you're going to generate that feeling in them. And when you break down and you yell and you cuss and you lose control of the field, that is when you give the other person the power to vilify you and avoid the responsibility of whatever it is that their shame is actively projective identifying itself in you. When we're able to bring it back to, no, this is your shame to hold because I'm just here recalibrating myself, being completely respectful, then that person has to sit there and own their dysfunction boundary. And when that starts, that's when you start hearing about people, yeah, I really need to go find help. I really need to change. You're not going to get your loved one to change by telling them, you keep doing this thing that really upsets me. You need to stop. You're going to help your partner change by placing a boundary so that they mindfully then begin to change themselves. That's how boundaries work. That is why they are non-therapeutic. They are for everybody. They're the things that PrecisionCycle teaches intuitively, because boundaries are the only thing protecting you from narcissistic attack, protecting you from malignant narcissistic engagement, protecting you from self-harm. We are built different. We don't need therapy because we're operators in this world, and we understand the power that we hold. We understand that when we walk into every room, we're the most well-calibrated, which makes us the most interesting person in that room. We know that we don't have to chase people because our gravitational field is so strong. They chase us. Next week, we're going to start talking about how we start utilizing Eros to help men become the person that they want to become, both professionally, personally. How do we become the most well-regulated, well-grounded, boundary-driven individual that we can, so that we're not being manipulated by the borderline narcissism of partners, people who want to challenge us and cause harm. We'll be going over that next week. This has been a special Friday recap. Thank you very much for joining me. I just want to make sure I'm reiterating the importance of boundaries. Boundaries are the one thing that are going to get you the peace of mind that you deserve, the peace of mind that you're looking for, because they're the only thing that vocalize your needs. Thank you very much to everyone who has downloaded episodes. Precision Cycle is brought to you by Elevate.epo, Enrique at ElevateEPO.com, Elevate.epo on Instagram and Facebook, ElevateEPO on Twitter. You could also see us actually on YouTube, both at Elevate.epo and now at PrecisionCycle TV. We have video versions of the podcast as well as behind the scenes videos of Precision Cycle in action. Hopefully you'll check that out and join us. We will be off Monday from the live show, but we will be having a taped special stand-up, and that'll be for Memorial Day. Back with the live show on Wednesday. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you very much for everyone who's interacted with the show, who has downloaded, who has sent us emails and communication. Really can't do any of this without you guys. And we really appreciate all of your support. Have a great weekend. We will see you this next week. Stay safe. Enjoy Memorial Day and enjoy each other.